Hey, everybody. Welcome. Hi, Ashley. Hi, Susan. Thank y'all so much. We're excited tonight to show you guys a really cool documentary. It's called Let Us Be Heroes. If you'd seen our post earlier, we were originally going to do Forks Over Knives, and we had gotten an initial approval, and then we got another letter saying, never mind, you're not approved. So, we decided we would show this one instead. We really like it, and we hope you all enjoy it too. Just a little about being plant-based or vegan. This has been now 6 years for me. I went vegetarian initially in 2003, and then vegan in 14, when right about the time we actually found Cotton Branch and met the original founder, Jan, and met the animals here. And basically my last holdout was cheese, and I cut that out and went completely vegan. And I can say it's made a world of difference in my life as far as me personally, but I don't even think about it as being anything different anymore. It's just life.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is like now there's so many different alternatives. I mean, there's Miyokos, there's a lot of different.
Oh, for cheese, for sure.
For cheese, yeah. There's just so many different
yeah,
things.
But
yeah.
I mean, I can say honestly, yeah, I don't miss anything. I don't think about it. So keep that in mind too. And for me, it was an ethical choice. It was not being able to look at these animals as anything other than companions and fellow beings. And I had felt guilty for years, which is why I went vegetarian in '03. But yeah, I couldn't do it anymore. So with that said, you ready to start up? Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for your donation. And
thank you so much.
Cool, you got purchased. You love the new designs. That's awesome. That's just, I love that design. I have so many of those because I wear them to work and out. So
yeah.
But yeah, ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Here is the movie. We will shut up now.
All truths go through 3 stages. First, it is mocked and ridiculed. Then it is violently opposed. And finally, we accept it as being evident. Slavery, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, gender equality, all movements went through these stages. One of the most defining truths that will be evident for future generations is the answer to this question. Is it possible that we humans as a species have been eating the wrong food? I was 16 when I traveled with my school overseas for the first time. We went to London and we had a great time. We visited the city. We had beautiful weather. At the end of that day, a teacher pulled me aside. And when I saw the look on his face, my heart stopped. And this is how I learned that my father died of cancer. Whenever I speak about this, people empathize and they share their own story and how they too have lost someone they love. A parent, a mentor, a friend. And as painful as it is, the truth is we have become so accustomed to this happening to us. It has become so common that we accept being sick and dying early as part of life.
Throughout my younger years, I was quite a sick kid, and I spent many years of my life in hospital, and I was just really, really weak. With nephrotic syndrome that I had, it required me to be on a whole host of steroids that really stunted my growth and also made me obese. And I felt really, really unconfident in my own skin because I always remembered when I was younger, I always wanted to kind of tuck in my shirt, but I couldn't tuck in my shirt. And I remember when I was in primary school, my friends and my classmates used to call me a double scoop ice cream with a cherry on top. I still remember those days where, all these guys were playing basketball and badminton and everything, and there I was, this fat kid that just wanted to kind of fit in. I remember watching Commando and Rambo 1, Rambo 2, Rambo 3 and looking at Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and looking at those guys. Man, I want to look like those guys. So I think that's how I kind of really got, all right, I want to start going to the gym and start to train. And so I went into the local gym just to start doing weight training. And of course, being a teenager, you just wanted to grow biceps and chest and nothing else. So that's all I did. I was always focused on protein, just getting big. And I was literally having like 5 to 6 kilos of meat per week. So we had like a chicken day, we had a fish day, we had a pork day, we had beef day. I just really didn't know any better.
Naturally, I've never been somebody who ate a lot of meat. I would probably eat like red meat once a month, fish probably once or twice a week, a bit of chicken, but mostly it was like beans and tofu. That's what I've always preferred. But then when I moved in with him, like I needed to accommodate his diet. I've always loved to cook. I had to eat the same way he did. My digestive system was really bad. I felt I was retaining water. I felt like I really didn't feel my best. and it was just, I remember training in the morning, like super early morning, and just feeling so lethargic. But because what I had, like I had like a steak for
5 a.m. we heated up a strip of steak with a knob of butter.
Because we believed that carbs were bad.
And I still remember when we went to the cafe and we had our bacon and eggs and we saw someone across eating fruits.
And we're like, oh, look at that
there's
person.
So much sugar in there.
So it was just, we were just like, I don't know, we were just stuck in our own ways. And I just felt worse and worse and worse.
If we look at the leading cause of death in the world, way more than wars, violence, and accidents, the leading cause of death is chronic disease. So disease like cancer, heart disease, strokes, diabetes, and these diseases together kill more than 30 million people every year. That's more than the entire population of Shanghai and Singapore combined together, or half of the UK, or more than the entire population of Australia dying of these diseases every single year. And when we look at these numbers, actually a really small fraction is caused by genetic predisposition, but more than 90% can be attributed to lifestyle choices, including diet. So here we are, running around, desperately looking for a cure to all these illnesses when the cure is in the prevention.
Recently, a few years back, the WHO classified processed meat as a type 1 carcinogen. And in fact, it becomes worse for you when you do things like put it on a grill, cook it, or have it with your deli cold cuts in a sandwich. In spite of this WHO classification, there's been very little recognition around it. It hasn't really moved the needle in terms of what's available at your grocery store or what's available on your plate when you go to a restaurant.
I think the way I was supplementing was to kind of fuel a nutritionally void and highly acidic and inflammatory diet. I had a lot of joint issues. I was big. I was probably a lot bigger than I am right now, but I had a lot of joint issues. I was quite lethargic. I couldn't really run at all. I remember when the tram was right over there and I had to run for the tram, I just let it go because I said, running is catabolic for my muscle mass, so I'm not going to run. Really, in actual fact, I just didn't have the energy.
Every single meal I felt bloated, I felt in pain. Just going for nice dates and nice places that I should have enjoyed, I was fearing going there. I knew I was feeling bad after, like it would just kill all the romance, all the fun that there should be around going to a nice place to eat. because I was just feeling so bad.
So at what point did you decide to do something about it?
So after about a year and a half of dating, I was like, I need to do something. And I saw on Facebook, there was a girl that I know. I just saw the pictures of her food, and it was like lots of fruits, and I couldn't believe. I was like, how can somebody just eat fruits for a meal? This is like too much sugar. It's not healthy. But she looked so good. Like her eyes were bright, her skin was beautiful. Like I was just like, I want to do what she does. I remember going to work and just buying a bunch of fruits as my lunch. I remember having like 2 or 3 bananas in a row and being like, oh my God, this tastes so amazing. I want that. And then I would say within a couple of days, most of my digestive problems were gone.
I saw a significant shift in her energy and just her digestion, and I was kind of inspired, like, okay, what's going on? I made the switch, and I remember that morning itself, I went to my gym with a big 800 grams of tofu. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I was just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna substitute gram for gram protein and see what happens. I was a little bit gassy because, of course, it's like 800 grams of tofu and beans that's gonna get you gassy. But I actually felt like my digestion was better. Although I was gassy, it was better. And I was having lots of fruits as well. And all of a sudden I had this spike in energy. And I think a few days after I made that switch, I went for my first run with Emily. I think we ran 5Ks. And I was astounded how I just ran without stopping. I was like, where is this coming from? This is crazy. I could not run after a tram before, and now I ran 5K without stopping. I had to relearn what I knew about protein, and through what I learned, I realized we don't actually need that much protein, and there's this overemphasis on protein, particularly animal protein. And what I've learned now is that at the end of the day, it's not how much protein you consume, but how much you're actually assimilating. Because when you're under this kind of protein spell, which was where I was, I forgot about everything else. I forgot about, what about my antioxidants, what about my fiber? I just did not think of that.
What girl's gonna go for me with a body like this?
Hang in there, Tom. I'm you 2 years from now, because you're drinking milk and working out.
Well, I'm not changing so far.
But milk's at work inside you.
Oh, yeah?
And tomorrow the difference can show. All that protein for muscle and calcium for bones.
But I'm still a skinny bench warmer.
Hey, if the sight of yourself at 18 doesn't convince you, Tom, listen to your senior year girlfriend.
Hi, Tom. I'm waiting.
Milk. It does a body good.
Growing up in America in the 1980s, 1990s, even the 2000s, you had a lot of ads on TV. Sitting there after school watching cartoons, and then all of a sudden you see a photo or you see an ad, a video with some beautiful celebrity that you recognize, and they've got this little white mustache across their face, and the ad says, "Got milk." So there was always this culture of drinking milk, and there was a lot of campaigns around drinking milk. The questions around the dairy industry really started to creep in when my parents started to get sick. My mother went through breast cancer, and my father had heart disease, and my father's diabetic from the past. And I started to really look at what could be causing some of these things. Everything I looked at, all of the research that I read, kept on coming back to this idea of nutrition, especially in the case of people like my parents who had never had a drink in their lives, they'd never had a cigarette, and they were vegetarian through and through their entire lives. It really became, well, how do we isolate potential causes of what's making them sick? Because it wasn't also hereditary in my family. And I started looking at things like dairy, started to really then begin to understand how products like milk and cheese and other things that we really rely on as vegetarians in places like America actually get to our plate and what's really in them.
To me, it just really does not make sense to drink the milk of another species. I'm a big supporter of breastfeeding, so I'm still breastfeeding my 16 months old. And to me, it just makes sense. Like, my milk is made to suit a baby human, and the milk of a cow is made to suit a little calf, to go from a very small calf to become a big cow or a bull within a very short period of time. So how would that be health food for humans?
In America, 80% of the antibiotics that are manufactured by the industry are actually pumped into and injected into animals, whether that's livestock that's slaughtered or that's cows, that then are making milk.
Even if it's coming from a cow that's been in your backyard, whatever, it still contains the growth hormones, it still contains the estrogen because it's coming from
a pregnant lactating female cow. So it's the highest amount of estrogens in there, and a high level of estrogens actually contribute to things like prostate and breast cancer. By nature, our digestive tracts, the length of digestive tracts, the pH in our body and the digestive enzymes in our mouth, we are carbohydrate digesting organisms. So when we actually consume a diet that's natural to us, we will thrive. I mean, not just thrive in the sense of health, but we'll perform better, we'll think clearer, we'll digest better. And there's so much science now and research showing that a plant-based diet also not just gets you healthy, but promotes long-term health and longevity as well. For me, it's about being around for a very long time and to be a granddad, maybe to be a great-granddad.
If we look at the blue zones, places in the world where people easily reach 90, 100 years old, disease-free, one of the key factors that help them maintain a healthy lifestyle throughout their whole life is their diet. And their diet is more than 95% plant-based.
I started changing my diet 17 years ago. I turned vegetarian. At that time, it was a very simple reason, just out of compassion for animals. And the one moment that shocked me was when I read about the United Nations reports about climate change and the livestock industry. That was a huge shocker. Animal agriculture is actually one of the biggest factors in terms of hurting the planet and also severely threatening the future of many generations and of the whole survival of mankind. Recently, I read a research that compared livestock or the key meat companies in terms of carbon footprint versus big oil companies. Now, we would think that the Exxon Mobils of the world are the evil in terms of carbon footprints. But shockingly, when you look at the top 5 meat companies, their combined carbon footprint is bigger than the top oil companies in the world. We are like a runaway train right now, and we are accelerating, but the cliff is here. So it's only a matter of time. In fact, I think it's happening already.
We can't ignore the fact that animal agriculture has a massive impact on the oceans. We've got these dead zones that are being created because of the incredible amounts of nitrogen being put into the oceans. We've got coral reefs bleaching and dying, and we have to acknowledge that animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of global warming. As 1 out of 3 fish that's being caught in the oceans is being used to feed animals, and overfishing is a massive problem that we have to deal with if we want to survive as a species on this planet, then we have to seriously review our eating habits.
The whole world is obsessed today with, cutting down plastic straw consumption, but the reality of it is that if you take all the straws around the world and you put them all into the ocean, that is still less than 0.1% of the plastic that goes into the ocean every year. In fact, more than 40% of the plastic that goes into the ocean is plastic fishing nets.
When I was 14 years old, I saw a picture of a dead minke whale being pulled up the slipway of an 8,000-ton factory whaling ship operating in the Antarctic. And that image really struck a chord to me. It became symbolic of this devastating relationship that we as a species have with the oceans. I think like most people, I thought that whaling was something that had ended in the 70s or 80s, that this was a victory of the conservation movement. So to find out that not only was it still happening, but it was happening despite the fact that there was a global moratorium on whaling made me feel the need to get involved and stop that crime from taking place. In the 1950s, there were over 50 industrial factory whaling ships operating in the Antarctic at any one time. Only one of those remain. It's a ship called the Nishin Maru. It's 8,000 tons, and it goes down to the Southern Ocean every single year and conducts illegal whaling in a designated whale sanctuary. This is the vessel that I saw a picture of when I was 14 years old, and a vessel that had haunted my dreams ever since. I spent 10 years working with Sea Shepherd chasing the Nishin Maru around the Southern Ocean. And one of the most harrowing experiences that my crew and I had was when we were put in a position to block that 8,000-ton factory whaling ship from refueling, knowing that if we could cut off their fuel supply, then we would force them to head home early, cutting their whaling season short. I remember it was a very wind-still day as the Sun Loral, this massive oil tanker, was getting ready to receive this 8,000-ton factory whaling ship alongside. My crew and I essentially double parked the tanker, telling this 8,000-ton factory whaling ship that if they wanted to refuel, they would have to go through us to do it, that they would have to sink us to take on fuel. That resulted in a 5-day-long confrontation where my vessel was sandwiched between these two massive ships, and ultimately this 8,000-ton factory whaling ship tried to push my vessel out of the way to take this position. But we stood our ground for the whales, and we stood fast, and by doing so, when we put the captain of the Nishin Maru in the position where he would either have to back down or sink us, he ultimately had to retreat. That was a year where we saved the lives of 932 whales, a year where the Japanese whaling fleet reached only 10% of their bogus self-allocated quota. I think generally people feel incredibly passionate about whaling. Most people would never eat a whale, and yet if you look at the industrial fishing industry, you'll discover that over 300,000 whales and dolphins are being killed every single year as bycatch of the industrial fishing gear.
I think globally food systems are broken and challenged. Today we have 800 million people around the world that are malnourished or hungry or starving, yet we feed cattle that's then slaughtered for food for a much, much smaller minority of people.
With knowledge comes power, and with power comes responsibility as well. And I believe that we need to have a collective mindset. It's no more about competition, because this earth provides sufficient for everyone. But it's really the greed that creates this disparity and this mentality of scarcity.
I think there's a tendency in the West that whenever illegal fishing or overfishing is discussed, that fingers are pointed at China. Most of the tuna that's being taken out of West Africa is being taken out of West Africa by the European fishing fleet in order to supply the demand for tuna in the West. What I've seen firsthand working all around Africa in combating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is this model that Noam Chomsky authored in terms of this is a transfer of so-called food from the needy to the greedy. And this demand that we have in the West, in wealthy countries for cheap, readily available fish is really leading to the seas being sucked dry out of waters where some of the world's poorest people are dependent on fish for their livelihoods.
We as human beings today kill and consume 100 billion land-based animals every year. That's more animals that we kill every year than all humans that have ever lived on Earth If you start adding up the fish in the sea that we take out of the sea every year, that's another 2.5 trillion.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the UNFAO, state that 90% of the world's fisheries are either fully exploited or overexploited. And if current trends continue, then by 2048, the world's major fisheries will be gone.
10 years ago, I was living in China and I adopted a dog, Oneida, and I learned that he was rescued from dog meat. And I was really shocked to learn that it was happening in a city like Shanghai. So whenever I found strays in the streets, cats and dogs, I rescued them. I was not just rescuing them from the streets, but also from the violence of what could happen to them. I thought I was doing my best for the longest time until about 3 years ago, I realized that I was saving some animals from being eaten, but I was eating other animals myself. As I was going through this realization, this awakening, I could see for the first time on my plate not just meat, but actually the flesh of animals that had to live a terrible life and suffer and die just for a few moments of pleasure for me. I looked at my very expensive handbag and it was like a spell broke, and I could see that it was just the skin of mutilated animals.
I lived in China about 10 years ago, and I remember buying a vintage fur coat, and I showed it to one of my Australian friends who just told me, "Are you aware that this might be like a cat or dog fur?" I was like, "What are you talking about? This is impossible." And she was like, No, here they do eat cats and dogs, and they do use the fur to make coats." And this is how I think I made the connection, because I was like, okay, I am able to wear a fox without caring at all, and I could not, like, even a second imagine wearing a cat or a dog coat because they're my friends and I grew up with them. I think that's the turning point where I completely stopped fantasizing about fur. I've decided to go cruelty-free because as a designer and influencer, I think it's our responsibility to act on something meaningful. Fashion can be seen as something quite superficial, without a meaning, careless about these kind of values. I think it's possible today to be trendy without being bloody, being fun without harming anyone. We cannot massively kill all these animals for coats, bags, shoes. I think people need to reconnect, and I think they forgot the connection. They used to have it when they were kids, but I don't think they can make the connection and relate to the cute little lamb they see on Instagram and the lambskin bag they just bought on a high-end brand.
As children, it is actually part of our nature to care and to have empathy towards each other, but also towards animals. But somehow along the way, we are conditioned not to care. After millions of years of evolution, nature has selected empathy as a human trait, and that means it's there for a reason. If we look at the egg industry, where only the females are valuable because they lay eggs, every other chick that is born that is not female, so the male, are considered a waste product because they won't grow fast enough to be profitable, and they also won't lay eggs. The most profitable way that the industry has found to deal with these baby chicks is to discard them as they hatch. We are grinding them up alive, gassing them, putting baby chicks in gas chambers. People tend to forget something very elementary, that a cow has to be pregnant and has to have a baby in order to produce milk, just like we humans or any other mammal. In the dairy industry, we want the milk to produce cheese and yogurt and ice cream. We force cows to be pregnant over and over. We take their babies away from them, one after the other, year after year, because obviously we don't want the babies to have the milk. The male are sent to slaughter for veal, and the female are raised to become dairy cows, just like their mothers. So it doesn't matter if the eggs or the dairy comes from a factory farm or a free-range farm. The matter of fact is all babies are taken from their mothers in the dairy farms, and all the male chicks are killed in the egg farms. And this is happening in the US, in Australia, in European countries, in Asian countries. It's happening everywhere.
There's a huge social justice component to it. It's unfair and unreasonable for us to kill just for our food. We don't need it. But in spite of that, and in spite of it being very bad for you, we continue to do it anyway.
Every single week, we are killing more than 1 billion animals. We are destroying our home planet, and it's all for foods that we don't need and that are making us sick in return.
I think one of the reasons that people generally don't tend to care so much about fish is that the oceans are out of sight and out of mind for so many people. It's been said that if slaughterhouses had glass walls, then everybody would go over to a plant-based diet. Now imagine that those slaughterhouses were hundreds and hundreds of miles offshore, accessible only by boat. Fish don't have vocal cords, so their screams are silent, even though they have the same capacity to suffer as we do. But we also have to look at how language is used to justify slaughter. We go to the supermarket and we don't buy cow, we buy beef. We don't buy pig, we buy pork. And within the fishing industry, the language is chosen very specifically to make a disconnect between people and the products that they ultimately buy. We don't talk about the number of fish killed every single year. We talk about the number of ton of fish that's killed every year. We don't talk about fish being killed or hooked or netted. We talk about fish being harvested as if they were apples being picked off a tree in an orchard. And we don't talk about fish populations. We talk about fish stock as if they were simply taken off the shelf of a warehouse. So in one single sentence, you can talk about X number of ton of fish stock being harvested. It's no small surprise that there is a big disconnect between people and the fish they're eating.
Well, the reality is, if we look at the urgency of the planet and the urgency of the whole macro issues, we should be turning our lifestyle upside down. People have emotional connection and relationship with food. Food is so much more than just filling our stomach or nourishing our body. It is social, it is emotional, it is cultural.
One of the biggest challenges that I've faced my entire life is when I go out with friends and there's 0 or maybe 1 vegetarian option, and it's worse when it comes to vegan options. We need to improve the experience. If the world is going to become more sustainable, we need to really deliver on this idea of creating more plant-based options everywhere.
I always say that for ultimate health benefits, we should all be eating organic whole foods every meal. Unfortunately, we live in urban societies. Most of us do not have time to cook. We may not even have farms around us. In the case of Hong Kong, in the case of many cities or many countries around the world, I think the food tech space plays a crucial role in this food revolution and protein revolution. We have been relying so much on animals to be the key protein or ingredients in our meal. If you just ask people to switch to tofu and vegetables, that won't work. I think Beyond Meat and Beyond Burger is one of the iconic example of that. People were still very doubtful, what does a vegan burger, how good could a vegan burger be? But now when any carnivore, or anyone for that matter, just get a bite of the Beyond Burger, majority, if not all of them, would say, hey, I can eat this every day. We work with a lot of these ingredients, plant-based chicken, plant-based burger, vegan eggs. Now, the ingredient itself is very exciting. We turn these ingredients into dishes that really can fit the local palates. Steamed buns or dumplings, ultimate comfort food for Asian people. To always understand that the ingredient is one part, but the recipe, what we do with it, and how to close that cultural gap or bridge that gap is critical in terms of shifting people behavior. I think to meet the urban lifestyle, also to meet the need that we have created, having these products is a good intermediate step. It certainly is an improvement over whatever meat products or processed meats that we eat.
It's really our choice what kind of world do we want to live in. Today, I view this opportunity for people to go plant-based or be more plant-based as probably one of the defining triumphs that we can have from a sustainability perspective.
Change can be scary because we think about everything we give up. We think about all the hassle. We worry about upsetting the people we care about. But actually, change is not about becoming someone else. And so when I changed the way I was living, I changed the way I was eating, but I became who I am.
Being an animal lover is about putting all animals on the same level. It's about considering them as true characters with an emotional intelligence, feelings, and even a spiritual side. I think putting the energy of a suffering animal in your own sanctuary is something that cannot leave you at peace, and you cannot be connected to the people and to life and love if you have a suffering energy inside you.
I know many people tell me, well, everything in moderation, we need to have a balance. Moderation in that context doesn't make a lot of sense. Would we say that, oh, it's okay to kill in moderation? It's okay to destroy the planet in moderation? If we are in a position to choose, it means we are privileged. So we need to really think about the impact of our choices on others and on the planet.
Sometimes I even question whatever we do, is that barely going to make a difference at all? How much difference can one person make? That's one type of sentiment that I have. But on the other hand, when I look at a lot of these people who are working very hard, whether they're scientists, whether they are researchers, whether they're academics, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they're investors, just channeling all their resources to this cause and doing whatever it takes to make a difference. And I am actually seeing real behavior change.
On my first campaign with Sea Shepherd, we were patrolling the Galapagos Islands to stop the poaching of sharks for shark fins. I remember feeling really challenged by the fact that here we were pulling up 8 kilometers of devastating, destructive fishing gear, but at the same time, there was enough of this gear set in the water all over the world to go around the world 80 times. And I remember thinking, well, what difference is this really making? But as the hooks were coming up on deck, I remember holding one of those hooks in my hand, and as it gleamed under the moonlit night, I thought, well, this particular hook is not going to kill a sea turtle or a shark or a tuna this particular night. And to think that that doesn't make a difference is incredibly human-centered. And I remember holding this hook in my hand and thinking that, okay, maybe we can't save the entire world, but we can certainly save the entire world for one particular animal. Being at sea is dangerous in and of itself, especially if you're going down to the Southern Ocean where there are dangerous ice conditions to navigate. It's not uncommon to have 8, 9, 10 meter seas in a place like the Southern Ocean. Coupled with that is the fact that we are going up against poachers and trying to affect their bottom line. My ship's been rammed on a number of occasions. We've had all kinds of dangerous confrontations with ships because we are trying to get between them and their profits. But ultimately, I think there is no greater responsibility, I guess, on us in being able to try to stop suffering than to get on the front lines at the scene of the crime between the poachers and the animals they're trying to kill.
There's a saying that says basically that we're borrowing the land from our children, but I really feel that there's a shift at the moment. I want to believe, because if I don't believe, it's just such a sad life. I just want to leave a better place for my daughter than now. When I was younger, a young person coming out as gay was seen like as something really bad, and now my daughter is going to grow up in a world where it's actually okay and normal. With our grandparents, mixed marriage like us did not even exist. And now we're in a world where it's absolutely normal and it's even great. My daughter is a Eurasian and now she's seen as a beauty. Decades ago, she would have been seen as an abnormality. So it's just, to me, these are all signs that we're actually we're evolving and the world is getting better.
I really believe that today, becoming more plant-based is not a compromise. It's not a sacrifice. It's simply a better way to live. It's gonna make you feel better. It's gonna make you sleep better. It's gonna make your relationships better, not just your relationships with animals and the earth, but also with people. I think it's a much more sustainable way to live, and by doing so, we can really raise the bar on who we are as individuals.
The difference I noticed when I changed my diet is that I simply got happier. I felt more connected to the people around me, to myself. I loved myself more, I judged myself and the people around me less. I think it's always good to have the hope. We need to.
What Sea Shepherd really represents is this requirement or this necessity for people to take individual action, that problems don't go away because we simply hope that they'll go away. Problems won't go away if we put all the responsibility for solving these problems on government or government agencies. Our own personal involvement is required. That trifecta of being able to protect the environment, save animals, and protect people, those are the three perfect ingredients that give me the motivation to keep going.
One simple switch has a profound effect on everything, because it's not just turning off lights when you're not using it, brushing your teeth and turning off the tap. Those are a small fraction of what actually contributes to a greener and better world. That simple switch of just looking at what you have on your plate is a vote for change for what you'd like to see in the world and for future generations. And it takes everyday people to make that shift, and that shift really starts on what you have on your plate.
Every time we eat, we have a choice. We can choose health over disease, peace over violence, protection over destruction. Empower yourself with knowledge, and when you do, you can answer that question. Is it time for a change?
Hey everybody! Thanks so much for watching with us. That was an amazing documentary to me.
Yeah, for sure.
It covered so many things, from the health to the environment to the cruelty aspects of consuming animals and animal products, and even wearing them, and what we choose to wear and use. And I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was really well done.
I think it was really great. I mean, like, we love Sea Shepherd. We love a lot of everybody that's represented here. It was a really good film.
Yeah.
Like, it was really good. And it touched on so many things. Like, I mean, we're going through so many different things with our health right now, especially with the coronavirus. But, like, having that spelled out to us, like, only 10% of chronic diseases are actually genetic.
Yes.
Everything else is diet.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Thank you, Lizzie. Yeah, and as so many of the things, I felt commonality with a lot of the people in there, like the person who had been vegetarian, but still consuming dairy, and then looking at his parents and realizing, what is causing these things in their lives when they lived as vegetarians their whole lives, and then with the empathy that humans as children have. That was me, I think, growing up. We had animals, and we had, my family had goats at one point, and we had a cow, and we had chickens, but we still ate these animals that we also had. I mean, not them, but we ate other animals. And as a kid, I remember thinking it was odd to me that when I went out in the yard and played, I had a chicken who would follow me everywhere that I went, and sit in my lap and follow me everywhere I would go. And then to come inside at dinner and eat chicken, I remember thinking that it was odd. And I think as I grew up, I still had that in the back of my head, because even in college, I tried to go vegetarian. Talk about being difficult then. I mean, I was living a fast food diet because I was in college and I wasn't living at home.
It was like fries and what?
I mean, when I tried to go vegetarian,
fries and salad.
It was basically salad and fries, and I ate dairy, so I mean I could have pizza and things like that, but there were even then only a few places that I could even get that, and so it was difficult, and I gave up. But then I remember cooking at home. I always hated anything, and I remember this growing up too, and it's one of the reasons I hate ketchup. We talked about that the other day. Is I always
the ketchup story.
It looked bloody to me for some reason, more than like a tomato sauce or something like that. And just tasting it and the smell and everything, I hated. So I hated cooking meat. And then I was always scared that I was not going to cook it correctly, and I was going to get ill or get my salmonella poisoning. So at home, I didn't cook meat unless it was, which is even worse, as you learn, but processed, pre-cooked food, frozen pizza or something. But I wouldn't eat meat at home because I hated cooking it, but I was letting other people do it for me and not thinking that much about it. And then really started thinking about it in the early 2000s, and then that's when I went vegetarian. And then I didn't know as much about the dairy industry. So.
Yeah, I mean, like we just saw, guys. I mean, whenever we talk about the dairy industry, we think, oh, it's just like happy cows frolicking in the field. They have babies, and we're just getting their milk left over from their babies. That's not the case.
Well, what a lot of people never think about or thought about, and what I didn't, is, cows don't just produce milk for the heck of it. There has to be a baby.
I mean,
like
humans.
Just like humans, and then that baby can't have that milk because it's going into production, so they can sell that milk or use that for cheese and other dairy products. So those babies get taken away from their mom. That's something I had never thought about. And like they said, even in your, local and humane or organic farms, that's still a consequence of what's happening. And, even if it's not a factory farm. And so, I was one of the guilty ones. I wanted to believe that, those are happy cows. They definitely, I'm buying the organic milk. I'm buying the free-range eggs, which just means absolutely nothing now, or free roaming or cage-free, which those words mean nothing.
It's a marketing term, and a lot of times that, whenever we're shopping in the grocery store and we're trying to be more conscious about what we eat, We get the plant-based meats, but like sometimes like the dairy and the eggs, we're like, okay, well, what's the best option? And the eggs are not. I'm telling you, free range. Like, what do they say? Like this much amount of light, like
free range,
like 2 hours every day.
Right. Free range doesn't even mean they're outside.
It's inside.
Cage free and free range does not mean they're even outside. Free roaming.
That's a marketing term.
There literally could be thousands and thousands of chickens in something the size of a 2,000 square foot home that might be outside, but they're still crammed into this tiny space. So yeah, I mean, it's all, they're not roaming around really free range, and like the chickens here that enjoy all of the property during the day and can go around and go wherever they want and explore, and then sleep in the barns at night. It's not like that, and that's what I imagined, and it wasn't true.
Yeah,
the cows that are roaming the hillside, that's not what it is for dairy.
I mean, like, it's American marketing, but like we thought. I mean, like this video really captured, I think, a lot of that.
Yeah,
and I'm very excited I came across it, and it's just a very good film, and just kind of brings it home to our normal food choices that we can make, and we can make a huge difference just by what we purchase every single day. So
yeah.
Awesome.
And I love the fact that they even, touched on fur and leather, and that they drew the comparison of, how she realized she's saving these dogs for years because she didn't want them to be eaten, but then she made the connection that she was eating other animals in her plate. What was the difference? And the lady with the fur, she was willing to wear a fox, but not a cat or a dog. Well, what's the difference? So I think that's really interesting. The same with leather and everything else.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Did anybody have questions?
Yeah. Go ahead, fire off the questions, guys. I mean, like,
or anything you wanted to talk about.
Listen, I really didn't even think about plant-based living and actually like a vegan living until I actually looked at the animals. And like whenever Josh can attest, like I was a meathead. I loved my steak. I loved my chicken. I loved all of that. But I think, whenever we talk about our food choices, like I'm looking at someone on my plate instead of something. And that's what changed for me, like very immediately.
Yeah. I mean, for years, 10 years, Evan and I were together, and, when Evan moved in, I told him I was vegetarian. I did not cook any meat in the house, and if he wanted to eat meat, that, although I prefer he didn't, if he wanted to eat meat, that was up to him, but that he would have to get his own cookware because I didn't want it cooked in my cookware. And then he would, I prefer he cook that when I'm not home because I don't want to smell it, because the smell kind of grossed me out after not eating meat for so long. I couldn't stand the smell of it cooking, so you're going to have to eat it when I'm not here. Well, at that point, Evan didn't cook. So
yeah.
It didn't happen. At home, it was all vegetarian.
Guys, I was very lazy at that point, and I was just like, fine, we'll have vegetarian food here.
Yeah, and then he would only eat meat when we went out, and then when he started cooking from watching the Food Network.
Yeah, I was your typical like, oh, okay, how can I veganize this?
Yeah, because, and he wanted to cook it so I could eat it. So he would veganize it so that I could eat it with him.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting, and then he turned out to be a very good cook. But I had stopped browbeating and trying to make him feel guilty and everything by that point. And it was pretty amazing that, it was your second visit, I think, to Cotton Branch that you sent me a message.
Yeah, I mean,
just like out of the blue that said, I'm vegan.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like it can kind of come full circle for me, because whenever we talk about our food choices, like I came from a culture where that's just was the norm, and then whenever I came down to Cotton Branch, I was able to see, like, firsthand. Like Jan was amazing and still is amazing, and like I was able to look at these animals and be like, okay, wow, they have intelligence, they have the thinking capacity to feel, to love, to grieve. And so like I started having all the like the realizations of these animals at Cotton Branch, and you know, 2 or 3 visits later, I was like, done. I cannot knowingly like look at this animal that we rescued, and they're living an amazing and happy life, and then I look at the other animal that may not be in front of me, but may be in a slaughterhouse, but they're a pig. They're both pigs. How can I deny that? Yeah. It's so crazy.
Hey, Joseph. Hi, Kelly. Thank you. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching, guys.
Misty. Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I know it was a long video, guys. Rewind it. Watch it back again. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed it. And, you know, I think the numbers are staggering when you look at how many, and when you look at how many sanctuaries there are in the U.S. for farm animals. And I've talked about those numbers before. It's the complete opposite. It's a mirror image of the reality. In other words, I think it's 97 to 98% of the animals killed in the U.S. every year are farm animals. 97 to 98% of the rescues in the U.S. are for dogs and cats.
Yeah.
So it's the absolute flip opposite, that only 2 to 3% of the rescues and sanctuaries do what we do and rescue farm animals, when there's such a drastic need. And when you look at that, sometimes it can be discouraging and sometimes it can be depressing. And, you know, what gives me hope and happiness is, one, the ones who are here, the ones we've been able to help save, and the ones we've been able to find homes for and other sanctuaries for, but also to watch things like this and realize how much people are coming around and making changes, and to see the speed at which this is growing in the world today over the last few years. I mean, I've said it many times, I couldn't imagine even 2 years ago being able to go through a drive-through at Burger King or Dunkin' Donuts and get an Impossible Burger or a Beyond Meat sausage. It's crazy. And so that's encouraging to me. And then, you know what? I always go back, because I have people that talk about that, and whenever people feel discouraged, and it's something that I always come back to, and you know, try to quote it as best I can, but it's the starfish story, if you've ever heard of that. So there was a young man walking along the beach, and this older gentleman had been observing him. And so the kid had been walking along the beach, picking up starfish that had washed up in the tide, and he would pick one up and throw them back in the ocean. And the man watched him for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then finally he walked over and said, you know, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm throwing the starfish back in the ocean, because if I don't, they'll die. And the man chuckled and said, look down the beach. There's miles and miles and miles, hundreds of thousands of starfish that have washed up upon this beach. How can you possibly make a difference? And the kid bent down and picked up a starfish, and he threw him in the ocean. And he said, I just made the world of difference for that one.
Yeah.
And that's what I always hold to myself, is even though we can't save everyone, we can be the world and make the world of difference in every life that we can.
And that's why this movie that we just watched is so important, because like if we can as a society realize these fundamental differences between sentient life and non-sentient life, like it's going to be huge. I mean, we really, I think this movie just really pointed out that particular truth, like that sentient life is there, and we have to recognize it.
Yeah. And I mean, we see it every day. I tell people always laugh if I'm walking through, and a lot of times as I'm walking by, I'm walking through different pastures, I'm like, oh, hey, Louise, hey, Bentley, hey, Bailey, and I'm, saying hey to the animals by names, and they'll go, do you know everyone's name here? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, but that one looks a lot like that one, and then they look a lot like, how do you tell them apart? And I'm like,
We just know
sometimes they can look identical, but you learn their personalities and their traits and the way they behave, and it's just like humans in that respect of they all have their likes and their dislikes. They get angry, they pout, they do things that I think are intentionally to annoy another one or even to annoy you. They grieve. We've seen that so many times when one has a friend who passes, when they've lost a family, and come here when they've come out of a pound come out of a shelter life in a pound from being in a cage and the fear that they felt, and then when you see them here, ones who have come from cases where they've been in small enclosures, and then to see them run and play and enjoy themselves here is like you really see them, yes, as the completely and totally sentient beings that they are, and the capacity that they have for joy and sadness and all the emotions that we do.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So I hope you guys enjoyed the film. If you have any questions after the film or after our live cast, just go ahead and send them on over. We will talk to y'all soon. Awesome. Cool.
Oh, cool.
Very cool. Well, we will talk to y'all soon. Y'all have a great and wonderful evening. We will see y'all later. All right.
Thank y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.